Hello and welcome to episode 10 of Area Control Bros, where we talk about area control games usually, but not this time.
Mm.
Yeah, you thought I was going to say Leslie, huh?
Usually I can respect.
Usually. And this time we're going to be talking about Primal, the Awakening, where hopefully we'll be awakening our viewers on our thoughts on this game, perhaps
Yeah.
primally after they're done with the whole podcast.
Yeah,
I
I'm gonna like
think
rip off my shirt halfway through.
Woo!
Very, very primal. Maybe that's more feral. I don't know.
I think they're pretty closely related.
They
I
are in
think,
my mind.
yeah.
Well, this is not an area control game, as I alluded to. This is a boss battler game. And I'd say boss battlers are a relatively new genre in board games, perhaps even the newest genre if we're looking at all the different sort of subcategories. This kind of came in with Kingdom Death Monster in what I think was 2015. I'm going to double check that really quick. Yeah, 2015 Kingdom Death Monster hit the stage. Kingdom Death Monster is still in the top 100. It's number 77 overall, 18 thematic, and it's a has kind of a reputation as this, and for a long time it was kind of the only boss battler. So it was like if you wanted to have this kind of experience, you bought Kingdom Death Monster, or as many people did, they probably just played it on Tabletop Simulator, where there is apparently an amazing Kingdom Death Monster mod. And it's
Right.
so
And you
good
wouldn't have
that
to spend $1,000 to get into it, you
yeah, I
know?
think I think it's like 300 for Kingdom Death Monster, but that's still a lot more than people
It's
would.
it's so modular though, and it seems like a
Yeah.
lot of folks who are into it are really into it, and they'll have the
Yeah,
whole damn spread, you know?
yeah, there is a lot to get it's like kind of a whole hobby of all of its own because I think um the mini you build the minis, they don't arrive pre-made, so like there's a hobby of building the minis and painting
Hmm.
them and gluing them and all that kind of thing. But also, yeah, like the bosses are modular. You can buy like one boss for 20 bucks or whatever until you end up with just hundreds of these things. I don't know. But I played Kingdom Death Monster before and it was cool. I don't own Kingdom Death Monster, so I'm not an expert on it. Um, but just interesting to bring it up is kind of it is kind of important as a game that kind of now has copycats. And what Kingdom Death Monster kind of did was it had things like the AI decks and to some extent reactions to sort of create this experience that was more real time. Like the monster, it's not your turn, then it's the bad guy's turn. The bad guy can do things on your turn, and maybe the bad guys are going to be rather than a discrete, like in a more maybe more mainstream dungeon crawler like Gloomhaven, bosses will have like phase one and phase two, like a video game boss fight. But in some of these other boss battlers, the monster will be constantly escalating in kind of a continuous fashion, where they're gradually becoming tougher or having or developing a more advanced moveset. And while we don't see that as much that aspect as much in Primal, the echoes of it can be felt throughout pretty much every game in the genre. And the genre stretches from the heaviest entries like Aeon Trespass Odyssey, which we brought up on the show a couple times. Ben and I played it, and I do own that. To even light stuff, like there's now very entry level boss battlers, Vagrant Song, Townsfolk Tussle, Encounters, Shattered something,
Hmm.
Shattered Wastes, I think, are all games that are could definitely be taught and easier to run than these heavy, massive box entries that are almost like their own sub hobby. And so I think that we'll see if the genre has legs, if it lasts another 10 years, but for now it seems to be there's interest in it. And this game is kind of the newest hot boss battler. Um, Earlier this year, kind of last year was Oathsworn, and now it's this game, which is a lot of people are talking it up quite a bit. And we played what is essentially a campaign of it. We did quite a few fights, and then we decided to just skip like a couple fights and go straight to the end boss and just gear ourselves out as if we had done the other fights. And because we kind of just wanted to finish it off. And so that's where we're at with the game. We played it quite a bit. We've given it a fair shake. We've done quite a few battles, so we're not um We haven't just played it 2 or 3 times.
Yeah,
And
I mean, I
yeah,
think we all played like 15 hours of this game or so, you know? I mean, it's a good amount.
maybe more even, maybe slightly
Yeah.
more. Um, and that feels so weird because ATO 15 hours would be like getting through the tutorial. But in this game, it's like a whole campaign.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So this game is a little different from KDM and ATO in that this game is not really designed to be as much of a campaign game. Frankly, the campaign is an afterthought. I mean, it feels like
Yeah.
this is the kind of game where it's at its best, where you're just like, hey, like let's just fight this monster, and you're not really thinking about the campaign aspects because this is not a game that has amazing emotional writing. It doesn't have deep lore. It doesn't have really anything interesting going on in the campaign, and even the special loot is not that interesting for the campaign.
Yeah. I don't like the speed of the progression in the campaign either, you know, like it feels like
Yes.
you level up a little bit too slowly and they do things in between leveling up, you know, giving you new cards and new equipment, different types of equipment, and it just doesn't feel like you're changing enough between battles for me.
Yeah, it doesn't really feel like there's much in the way of like a hugely impactful upgrade. I remember there was like a card I was thinking about trying to build around, which was like snare, because it would do my weapons damage every time I had a defensive card played in my like row. And I like wanted to try to make that work, but like the decks are mostly similar by the end of it as they are near the beginning. Because there's like it's not really like any one card doesn't feel like a very like massively impactful change. And also like you keep most of your starter deck. You
Mm,
and like you very slowly get like extra cards to be able to swap out, and then the weapons let you change how you like what kind of cards you have and like and what to get rid of. But I don't know. It didn't feel like there was much it didn't feel like there was a very huge way to like define yourself in one of these like sub archetypes. You
mm,
know, I felt like mostly you're going to be doing pretty similar stuff with no matter how you build the deck. Like the deck that you were playing, I feel like you're gonna do some volley and some blind. And then like the deck I'm playing is you're gonna assist, you're gonna taunt, you're gonna be like most of my powers seem to be like being able to have reactions that would cancel stuff. And then Will, I don't know if the deck that you played really felt like it had like another archetype other than just doing all of the damage for us. Um,
yeah,
I,
I
very
mean,
powerful. But you know, and to your point, Ben, yeah, it feels like there's not any one card that's going to completely allow you to change how you're building your deck. And so again, I think that lends itself to like just don't even worry about the campaign progression. If you want to try something different with this, I think you're going to have more fun if you scrap this idea that you need to fight, you know, three more monsters before you can unlock, you know, two more cards, and you know you need to fight another three to get the two cards you actually want that you think might work with, you know, the weapon upgrade you just got. You're going to spend a lot of time doing that. I think you'll have more fun just going in and saying, what if I put together this whole slew of cards with these different weapons and items that have this synergy and try that out. And that exploratory process is quite fun, and I feel like the campaign just sort of denies you it with how slowly you get things. You know, I don't want to be thinking about, well, how do I get the deck that I want to play in, you know, 5 fights, which, you know, is going to be, you know, however many hours of gameplay. Yeah, I think you would do better to just jump into the actual meat of the game, fight some bosses, pick something that you want to do, you know?
yeah, I'll bring up a pro, well, more of like a neutral point. But there's a lot of boxes for this game. You know, there's a lot of big miniatures. So if you're a big fan of like painting and you know doing that, the miniatures are really cool. Those are some like good pieces to paint up, and you could use that in like a bunch of other stuff too. You could use that in a like D&D game or something. A lot of them are dragons, so like
Yeah, if you had like an RPG setting that is like the Monster Hunter, because this is basically a Monster Hunter setting by fans of Monster Hunter that is not called Monster Hunter. But if you had like an RPG setting that's like, we're going into the wilds, where are there are all sorts of beasts, like yeah, the minis for this game would be perfect for that because you've got all sorts of like weird different elemental beasts and things. And yeah, most of them are dragon-ish, but a lot of ones that are kind of wacky. There's some bugs, there's some wolves and tigers and crazy things.
Yeah.
yeah. And for that price, I mean, and miniatures are expensive, especially ones that are like, yay big, like,
Yeah,
about
they're
a
big.
little bigger than a baseball. Like like you might just buy this game for the miniatures alone. If you're one of those people who just are looking for some miniatures, it might be
If
worth
you're one
it.
of those people, yeah,
I feel like you're
not
the
I.
closest among us to being one of those people, Ben. So
I
it's like
do. I
funny.
mean, I have some stuff I've painted, like
Yeah.
I have a Warhammer army. I was working on a second one before I lost my passion for the craft,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah,
Dang, we're getting
I
into the
I could not
backstory.
imagine myself painting all those. I don't know. I feel like I would be stressed out by the process. But yeah, there's like a real hobby of it. And I thought that was interesting you bringing that up, Will, about these boss battlers have almost sort of become like their own thing, their own little subgenre. And I didn't know that about Kingdom Death Monster, that the you know the miniatures, the sculpts or whatever come needing to be assembled. And so that's interesting because yeah, that would sort of bring people in who want to have sort of the crafty side of it as well, and probably naturally people wanting to paint it. So is that a big part of these boss battlers in general that you have sort of these paintable or
I mean, certainly most of them have miniatures, not all of them. I think the lighter entries, like I mentioned, Vagrant Song, Tanso Tussle, I believe they have standees or acrylic, or maybe they're minis for Tanso Tussle.
hmm,
But it's not like as a big a deal. Certainly ATO has some absolutely mind-blowing minis that you can paint, but you don't really need to assemble them.
hmm,
I guess the only exception is that there are the little breakable locations on some ATO bosses, and you can like attach a platform to them
okay.
Yeah.
because like in the breakable part, your Titan can like jump up onto that part of them. And if you wanted to like show that on the board, you can, although typically I don't. I'm just like, okay, I jump up on it. You know, I don't need to literally put the platform on the thing in order to like mentally know that I'm on the thing, but that's neither here nor there. But yeah, I think that minis are a bigger part of this, and I think it makes sense, right? Because a part of this subgenre is that it's this focus on like singular battles and not like you don't fight 20 goblins to fight the goblin chief. You're fighting like the super mega goblin chief who is the biggest goblin chief on Earth,
Hmm,
guy. And that's kind of what the genre is you're not worrying about these extra elements. You just are fighting the apex version of whatever you're fighting. And
right.
it's more complicated and more in depth to make up for the fact that there aren't these extra elements in the fight. And Primal's interesting in that I think that it does do some interesting stuff. I think that the most interesting thing it does is it removes the board, basically. Most of these games have a hex or grid structure for movement, and that is where a lot of the game happens. It's like a lot of movement related abilities. Range units have certain ranges that they want to be at. Melee units want to be up close and personal, of course, and maybe the boss is quite mobile, maybe it's not. And so a lot of the diversity between bosses is going to be generated by how the boss is moving, um, and how you're moving relative to the boss. However, this game is interesting because there's only four spaces on the board, and the four spaces are all abstracted to be relative to where the monster is facing. So you can imagine the monster thematically is running around, but you're behind it. And that's just where you are. You're behind it. You're not like behind it by three spaces. You're not behind it by one space. You're just behind it. That's how Primal is. So like if you're in front of it, you're in front of it. You're behind it, you're behind it. Throw away the rest of the board. That's it. And so I think that that was an interesting choice. I think that that is not a bad choice. I think it's an interesting choice, and I think it could work. I do think, though, having played the game as much as we have, that I think something is lost by doing that. And I think that a lot of the memorable situations in ATO that I still think about, um, like crazy situations, resulted from the fact that there was something quite dynamic happening on the board. Um, a significant amount of literal physical movement from me or from the boss or from Ben, or a whole sequence of movements. And you do lose that kind of dramatic aspect on the board in this game because the board is not, there's really very occasionally there's stuff like the dragons breathe fire on a spot and you got to move, and there's that water gimmick that one time.
Yeah.
But I feel like the board just isn't that important, you know? It's not really like the core, it's not really like the
Yeah,
focus of the game.
you mostly just care about being in an area where you can hit the monster, you know? And maybe you track the reaction cards and you realize, oh, well, this one that just came out, if I end my turn where I'm at and then the next person's turn starts, it's gonna hit two people, it's gonna hit on either side of it. So I want to be behind it instead of on the side of it. You got to get pretty granular to really make much of a plan around that, you know?
Yeah. I do think I like the core of what Primal has going for it. And I think that like when we first started, I enjoyed it quite a bit. Like I enjoyed like how it worked most like for the most part of like how the wounding worked and how it escalated the monster. And like a lot of the mechanics are good, but this is something I mentioned to you guys is I in like the higher level fights, because you have like level one, level two, level three, mostly what happens is you just get weapons that do more damage as the player, and then the boss has more HP. And I really don't think it works very well as a board game. Like in a video game, bigger number good is like, fine. But we like by the time we leveled everything up to level three and we fought the like final boss, it was like, okay, well, it's like, okay, okay, Will, you did how much damage? Like, okay, we're adding like four. We're going like putting in like two, but he's subtracting two, so you're doing 26 damage, and then it's vulnerable, so you're actually doing 54, and then you need to do 180 to wound him. Okay, so let's put all the chits down, and
Okay,
now, okay.
so I guess since you brought it up, we can talk about one of the major cons of this game, which is just math. I don't think that the level of math in this game is necessary, and in fact, it detracts from the experience. And again, we're all smart guys here. Um, we know how to do addition and subtraction, but the game gets bogged down a lot by just exactly what Ben was describing. And this is an easily solved problem. And not only is it an easily solved problem, it's a problem that was fixed to begin with and then they broke it. Because normally in boss battlers, you're checking to see if you wounded, and it's binary. You didn't do 50 damage, or you didn't, or 25 damage, or 75 damage, and then you subtract that HP from it, which is essentially what you're doing in Primal. Um, you just wounded it or you didn't. Like that's it. You just you got it or you didn't. And so like we're just all the dice and all the abilities, we're just checking to see if you did it or not. In Primal, there's this kind of it's kind of like getting down to the nitty-gritty because even though technically you're checking your HP to like wound it, it's it doesn't really play out that way. It's kind of just like the number of wounds times the number of HP in each phase. And
And
you,
times
Right.
the number of players too. Like that was
yeah,
another
and
thing I
and
didn't like very much either. Like
yeah, and that's just its total HP. And so it's much more like a video game boss or something, where it's not really like it's a struggle to wound it. It's more like you're just gradually piling on, a couple damage at a time, 20 damage, 30 damage. You got to get to 180 damage on this wound, and then the next wound's going to be 200 damage, or whatever. And so it really just has a big HP bar. And so the wound system doesn't really make any sense in this game, except as a way to sort of discreetly decide when it changes phases. But again, the whole point of boss battlers to begin with, I thought, was that you avoid this kind of thing and you're sort of trying to create this more cinematic experience where you're not bogged down by just HP numbers and you kind of have this boss that's evolving much more rapidly. Um, and certainly ATO feels that way. Ben can attest to it, where like it's a struggle to get wounds. You're worried about all the things the monster can do, and when the monster gets like an upgraded deck, you're just panicking. And the primal bosses don't actually upgrade their decks mid-combat, which is another thing that I think is missing here. And whereas in most of the games of this genre, like if you hurt it, it starts to get scarier cards and that it can play. Um, yeah, I guess it doesn't have that at all. Like they just don't have, that's not in the game. Like they just have the deck they have for the whole encounter. And instead of escalating, as it's called in the other games, it's actually called that in this game as well, kind of ironically, because the escalating that it is in this game is not the escalating that it is in normal boss battlers. But the it just gets some struggle tokens, which is like, who cares? Like you can get rid of those, and it's usually not a major issue. Um, And so like the tension of the fight is not really there. And what's crazy is that most games in this genre do not have a time limit. This game has like a 10 round limit. And honestly, I cannot imagine you ever reaching the 10 round limit. But like there's no time limit in ATO because like you're just gonna die if you take that long.
Hmm.
Like your time limit is that you got to kill this thing before it kills you. I don't think
I
I
think we
don't
had I think we had one crab monster that tried to like just run out the clock basically. Like
it was
it
trying
had
to
some effects where it like increased the
yeah.
round counter where it was like I don't know, it was just trying to disappear into the ocean before we could do anything
But
before
even
we
but
could kill
even
it.
then it was like breaking the fourth wall. Like its ability was like increasing the round counter. It wasn't like actively trying to drown us. Like how does that make sense? Like I personally I think it's more exciting if like, oh man, the monster is doing something that's really dangerous. Like we got to take care of it now. We got to put this thing down. Not like, actually as the crab, I have the ability to reach outside the game and reduce the number of turns you have to kill me. Like what?
I have a dentist appointment I need to
Yeah.
get to very urgently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The crab called in sick. Yeah.
But
It's true though.
anyway,
There's
yeah,
so
sorry, go ahead.
much damn health on these monsters in this game. It's kind of ridiculous. And it feels wrong how much health there is. I think the very first game we played, we didn't do the health exactly right. We didn't do a few things right. It was a learning game. Um, I think we messed up the health because it feels wrong, to
I think we
multiply
did it
the
as a wound
monsters like.
system. I'm pretty sure we like
I
we were
think we
just
just
like,
yeah, we just
yeah,
assumed it was like ATO and we're like, yeah, like this makes sense and like it was probably better the way we played it.
yeah.
It might have been. Yeah, what will yeah. But no, you end up with these huge HP bars and like some of these monsters might have, 1,000 health and well, what's the intrigue for everybody? Everybody's deck does something a little bit different and I think the exciting part is dealing the damage. And I had built like a damage dealing deck when we were on level 2 and was having quite a bit of fun with it. And when we skipped to the final boss, I switched to the deck that I had wanted to play with the ranger character for the whole time, which was the volley deck, because you get given this volley mechanic from the very beginning, and it's absolutely terrible. Um, there's tons of monsters that block damage, incoming damage like by instance. Basically, they might reduce each instance of damage by two or something like that. And while the volley, basically randomly can deal, one or two times your weapon level if you've like got a volley two. I don't even think there is a volley three card, which would then try to deal damage, you know, still one time because it's one instance, and that's what I'm getting at. But anyways, the volley never did enough damage, and then half the time it would do nothing at all because you're trying to deal damage over multiple sources by having a lot of volley cards. And
Wouldn't it
it's like
just
my
mill
whole
your
thing was
deck
just
as well?
done. Yeah, you just mill your deck, you hurt yourself. It was kind of a dumb mechanic, but I was like, surely this works. I mean, they've given it to me from the very start. I see all these upgrade cards that work towards it. I see these weapons that work towards it. And I mapped it out and decided, well, this won't work until level three. So when we tried the final boss, I did the damn volley deck, and it was just terrible. Um, and I suspect that there's quite a bit of things like that in this game, from my looking at it. It seems like there's a lot of strategies and a lot of ways to build the deck that are just not good, and you kind of get railroaded into
Yeah, I think
playing
that
the good cards.
maybe the best way to think about it isn't that like something isn't good, but rather that usually for the characters and especially for the itemization and equipment in this game, there's just an obvious best choice. So like I don't want to think about it as like volley being like bad, although in this case volley is kind of bad. But just in general, I feel like there's like a, oh yeah, like why wouldn't I build my character this way if I just want to be efficient? Like anything that isn't this way to build my character is going to be objectively worse. And
Hmm.
maybe there's like some kind of crazy team setup where we all collaborate to make one subpar build shine.
Yeah.
But in more often than not, it's just people are just going to be doing the build that works in most situations. And that's going to result in people picking like the same equipment and the same cards and the same kind of build that's just going to be generically good. And what's generically good in this game also seems to just be the best anyway.
Hmm.
Like being generically good is itself a strength in this game. And I didn't feel that interested in like the itemization and the gear. And again, usually this is something that's a really big part of this genre is how diverse and interesting the itemization and equipment and character builds can get. And it's interesting because ATO does not have a deck building aspect to the game whatsoever.
Hmm.
And the combat is still more interesting. And it's, if anything, I would say it's closer to like a tableau builder because you end up having all these abilities that are in front of you and pieces of gear that you can activate at any time. And you can like tap them or exhaust them and you can't use them again the next round and that kind of thing. But you can use them reactively. And that kind of puts the player in the driver's seat. But to skip talking about ATO, I think that the closest comparison to this game, for anybody watching this who's played Oathsworn, this is basically quite similar in weight to Oathsworn. So Primal on BGG is 3.76. Oathsworn is, I think I looked it up before and it was very, very close. 3.67. So actually the second two digits are just reversed.
Hmm. So very very slightly heavier from the community rating.
Yeah. And I don't think that any of the added complexity in this game, insofar as there is any, is beneficial. And I don't think the deck building is better. I don't think the card play is better. I don't think the narrative is better. I don't think the combat is better. I mean, it's kind of like if you, well, skipping to the end a little bit here, but like if you have Oathsworn and you're looking for the next Oathsworn, this is not the next Oathsworn. Um, Suffice to say.
Hmm.
But I think part of it is that Oathsworn does kind of have a similar problem though, which is that deck building is not that interesting in Oathsworn.
Oh,
You
really?
Yeah, it's the deck building. Well, I mean, there's a reason I'm bringing this up. So the deck building part is not that interesting. You only have seven cards in your deck. They're two threes, two twos, two ones, one zero. That's always there. However, the deck building isn't that interesting because the decisions you make with those cards in combat are interesting. So like the building your deck part is really quick. It's not really like in Primal, we spent a lot more time building those decks, but like once you're in combat with those cards, there's a lot to do with them, and they have multi. Each card can be used for multiple things. Usually, you can use them defensively or offensively. They go on cooldown when you use them in this interesting way, and so like you spend less time thinking about the deck building and more time playing the damn game. You know, like
Hmm.
you're actually more engaged in the combat and like the card play. And I think that Primal, a lot of the time people are just like doing their turn and everyone else is like whatever. I mean, like I mean,
Yeah, that's
it-
true. One thing I didn't like about during other people's turns, I didn't feel like I could really think about my own turn because man, you have a lot of start of turn effects in this game that really change your decision later, either because you're, you know, getting more cards or what have you. And yeah, a lot of card draw in the game as well throughout your turn. Um and fairly limited card play, given the hand, right? Like you have to discard cards in hand to play other cards, which, is a fine system and works great in a lot of games. Um, but you can't really plan out much of your turn as a result. You kind of need to wait and see what exactly you're going to have. And so you're sitting there not able to think about your own turn, not really much caring about the other person's turn, and they haven't thought it out. They're just figuring it out as they go because they just drew, a bunch of cards at the beginning of their turn or what have you. Um, I don't know. It's the flow of the game doesn't quite work in that aspect for
Yeah.
me.
I cared about your guys' turns, but that was because I specifically built a like deck that was just, oh, hey, like you guys need some cards, like you're trying to do your thing. Do you want like a card? I can give you a card.
Right.
Um, and like I think in the last final boss battle we played, I for the first two rounds, I just played no cards and hid behind a rock to avoid attrition damage, and then like gain some stamina tokens just to like give you guys more cards to do stuff. Um, yeah. I mean, I had some like reaction stuff that was like useful. Like I was probably the one person who did care what was going on in other people's turns because it was like, oh, is that reaction card really bad for you? I mean, I can cancel it, you know?
Right.
Um, so like I had some of that going on, or it's like, well, your engine's out of gas. Like, let me give you a little kickstart. Um, or
And
like
I
you
think
need the
I think that was so good that you were able to do that too. I feel like it would have been such a bigger drag, like mentally, trying to figure this game out if I couldn't, you know, on occasion be like, I fucked up like how many cards I needed, how much energy I needed to play this hand. Can I get like one more energy? Just being
yeah.
able to
Ben
ask that.
Ben was like the secret MVP
Oh yeah, without a doubt.
behind the scenes. I think but I think I want to agree with you, Blake. I think there's so much that happens between turns, and this actually is two cons. It's not just one con. There's the con of not being able to think that much about what you're going to do during your turn until the very beginning of your turn, because as you said, there's so much card draw and so many effects that let you sort of filter your deck early on in your turn. And but this is compounded by the other con, which is that especially once you get to the later monsters and the sort of higher level monsters, they're reacting too much. And
Hmm.
that is like I firmly believe that. And
Yeah.
this isn't like a oh get good, just like make it so that they can't react. It's like, yeah, I mean, you do have the ability to manipulate that to some extent. But there are just going to be times where like you just can't stop them from reacting, and then something else will come out, and then that thing instantly happens, and then that'll trigger the rampage, and a whole bunch of things will happen. And I think this is an issue caused by them deciding to make the game reaction only. So even though in some of these other boss battlers, the monsters will be able to react outside of their turn, they still have their own turn. And so during your turn, you might provoke them to doing something, but they're still going to have a turn where they do their thing. And I think that's good. Like, I don't think that that should have been removed because this is the alternative. We're looking at the alternative, which is that the monster's turn is everybody's turn. And like, you don't know when they're going to take their turn, and it's going to take a while. And it kind of just it throws like a wrench into the works because like you're kind of thinking about your turn and it's like, oh, I just drew all these cards. What am I going to do? Oh, wait, it reacted to me because it was facing me at the beginning of its turn. Well, we got to do that. Well, okay, now that happens, and then something else happens, and then that causes this thing to happen. Okay, can I do my turn? Okay, I play this card. Oh no, the new thing that came out is going to react to this card I played. We got to do that. And so like it feels like you're trying to walk down the street and it's like filled with potholes that you keep falling in. Like I just want to walk
Yeah.
down the sidewalk. Come on. And so a lot of the time in like the other boss battlers, the reactions are only triggered by doing something significant. It's not just like you happen to be walking down the street, which is what it feels like in like late game and Primal.
Yeah,
And like,
the fire is a pretty bad offender of this because it's like you might have this whole turn planned out, like you finally got your shit together and you figured out what you were gonna do, and then the first card that you play triggers a card that just sets you on fire, and now you can't play cards.
yeah, and it's
Oh
just like,
yeah.
oh,
I
great.
I
Well, I
hate
guess
the
I'll just
fire.
pass, you know?
It's like, well,
I-
guess I'm done.
What a
Yeah.
dumb mechanic the fire is. I can't believe that they like made that in the game at all, but that there are certain bosses that like rely on that fire mechanic.
I
So yeah, when you're in a space that is on fire, you cannot move, or rather you need to move out of it because you cannot play cards. But because of the reaction system, you can have fire drop down on you after you've already like gone past your opportunity to move during the beginning of your turn. And it's like, okay, well, I guess I just get to do nothing. And it can even happen, as Ben mentioned. I think there was that wyvern that we fought that had a fire effect from starting the turn in the same square as it, or the in front of it or whatever. But
yeah,
whatever the case, yeah, there was just some dumb stuff with that.
I think fire would be okay if it just happened like at the end of a round and you could plan around it. Like
Yeah,
like if there was no fire coming from reactions, you could plan around it and it'd be like, okay, this is like this mechanic I have to work around. And we're utilizing the spatial aspect of the game, which is frankly underutilized. So that's fine. But the fact it can just happen out of nowhere, and like, once you know a monster quite well, you'll know like, oh, that's the fire card before it's even flipped over, so we got to avoid that. But like sometimes you can't avoid it, and sometimes it's just gonna happen. And it feels terrible when that happens.
yeah. I also don't love about the reaction system. Uh, Part of the tool set that you're given to deal with all these reaction cards. The reaction decks aren't that big, right? One of the tools that you're given to deal with reaction cards is just to like remove one of the cards and like put it into the discard, basically. All that is really doing is accelerating how quickly you're going to have to reshuffle the deck. And when you reshuffle the deck, there's a negative effect. It adds um,
Struggle.
is that what it is? Yeah, struggle. It adds more struggle to the monster, and then the same reactions are going to come out. And so half the time you don't even want to do it because oh that reaction that's already in the discard is really really bad for us. We really want to get closer to that reaction, and the tracking of all the reactions is quite annoying to me. Um, yeah, it's a bit much that system. I appreciate them trying to make it work because in theory it might be cool. Maybe it flows better a game where the monster doesn't have its own turn, but it just really bogs it down.
Yeah,
Well,
I
sorry,
wish
go
the
ahead.
effects were a little bit like I guess they're usually pretty simple. I was like, I say I want them to be simpler, but like I guess one of the other mechanics I don't like too much is the rampage, where it's kind of like, oh, he does one thing and then that triggers another thing, and then you have to refill the whole market, and then you might have then you have to like completely reevaluate and be like, okay, well now what do I not want to do? I don't know. Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah, it's really annoying. And I think attrition is also like attrition and the overreactivity of the bosses is like they're compensating for the fact that the monster doesn't have its own turn. But like when you take into account how kind of annoying the bookkeeping is on both of those things, I'd rather just give the damn thing its turn. Just give the damn dragon its turn. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, it really does need a damn turn. I was just looking at the ratings for this game, and it's got me rather surprised. I feel like there's probably some sort of big Kickstarter effect on this one. because there's a ton of just like flat 10 ratings with no text. Like to me, if you're gonna give a 10, even if it's on like a public forum like Board Game Geek, shouldn't you at least like support that opinion? I mean, a 10's you're really saying something there, you
Yeah,
know?
you got to
Am
explain
I crazy?
yourself.
Like just having a 10 and nothing else is a little bit nuts to me.
I agree.
Uh, I don't know. I think it's a symptom of the culture. I remember I had
Yeah,
like a Comcast guy over and he was like, "Yep, please give me a 9 or 10. Everything else is considered bad." Like,
right. Yeah, or like
Just
Uber
for that, I'm giving you
drivers.
an 8.9.
Right.
But
I heard that like Uber drivers can get fired if their like average star rating out of 5 falls below like a 4.2 or something dumb like that.
jeez.
It's like they have to get
yeah.
5 stars. It's like, oh my God.
Well, as far as this game goes, though, I do think that part of it is not just the Kickstarter effect, which is a part of it, but another part is the this game doesn't really lose its luster for the first few plays. You
Hmm.
know, I think it still has novelty for the first two or three times you play this game. And it's only really when you play like the fourth time, maybe a little the third time, but mostly the fourth and onward times where the cracks really start to show, you know?
Hmm.
Because
Yeah.
I do think that
Yeah.
this is like there are good ideas here. I just don't think that they worked out as well as maybe they could have. And I think these are I can see at least where they were coming from. They were like, let's remove the monster turn and we'll try to give it more actions to compensate. And so, like, I appreciate that they wanted to innovate. And I will definitely praise this game for innovating in a genre because, as I was saying, it's quite different from the other games in this genre. Certainly, ATO is closer to KDM than this is to either of those games. However, I just don't think the innovations were like in areas where this genre needed to be innovated in. Like innovating in the part of the genre that's so cool is the weirdest choice to be innovating in. Like I think everybody who plays these games likes the AI deck and the escalation aspects of them, and that's really where a lot of the intrigue and like the cool stuff happens. And even with Oathsworn, where the it's a little bit simpler than ATO or KDM, it still has a similar thing going on, which is that you have a lot more control when you're provoking a reaction, and you have a lot more control in how you're setting up for the how the enemy is going to do things because you have your whole turn. And this is nice for like table talk for a co-op game, which is what these games are. Be like, hey, like I'm gonna go here and do this. When he comes in to swing that sword at me, can you come in and just step in and just block it with your shield since you're Mr. Shield guy? I mean, you'll be like, sure, like that sounds good. And because
Right.
maybe we have some way of knowing vaguely that he's going to do that, whether by an ability that looks at the AI deck or by us knowing that he'll react in a certain way, we can set up for that. And that feels good for us to be able to enact a plan together without quarterbacking, just being like, hey, I'm going to do this. Can you help me out with this? And be like, yeah, I can do my character's thing, and we'll work together to make this work. That doesn't really happen that much in Primal. Like Ben's character could do some things outside of his turn.
Yeah, like the taunt mechanic was a cool way that some of that could happen, you know, where you could
Yes.
turn the enemy and take aggro. And I thought
Yeah.
there was some interesting space there for plays, but yeah, for the most part, no.
Yeah, we
And
did have we did have a similar problem with the fire with the facing because there's like sometimes if like the front of the monster can't be hurt. So like if I wasn't there, I'd be shocked to imagine, it'd be horrifying to imagine what would happen otherwise because I feel like there would have been a lot of times where Will was setting up a big damage turn. First reaction is the monster turns to face him, and then he just can't play attack cards.
Right.
Like,
part of this is that they chose to make movement happen before card play rather than giving the player flexibility. Like, in Oathsworn, for instance, like I can move and attack in any order. Like as long as I've still got stamina in that game, basically, I can just do stuff during my turn. Like you don't tell me when I do what I do, I'll just do it in any order. And like I don't know if like these games benefit from that kind of limitation. Like I don't feel like, oh, this is like a great design decision that like I have to move now. Because all that enables is it enables the monster to turn off my turn randomly sometimes
Right.
and not
And it's
let
like,
me.
oh, I'm gonna. Yeah, I don't know about you guys, but for the character I played, I think if you had every single upgrade card, there were two, I think just two cards that could allow me to move during the turn. And now, of course, I was playing with the crystal boots that would let me move at any point during my turn, which was quite strong. But am I really going to put, the two movement cards in my deck to mitigate that possibility that I might be shut out of my turn because the monster turns to face me due to a reaction? No. I mean, even if I were to, there's no guarantee I would be able to do it on any given turn.
Yeah, you might not
Um,
even have the card in your hand, and then
right. Yeah. So yeah.
and I think that this is kind of my overall feeling on the game, which is that when you're fighting the monsters in this game, it doesn't feel like you're really fighting a monster. It feels like you're fighting like the system. It doesn't feel as thematic. I mean, okay, not in like an anarchist way,
You're
but
like,
but in like a kind of like a it's kind of like, okay, well, it's going to react if I do this, and if I do this, it'll turn. So I'll just stand here where it won't react, and then it won't do this. And now I'm just going to do what I'm going to do, and which is just hit it for a bunch of damage. And the way I'm hitting it for a bunch of damage is exactly the same way as I've hit it for a bunch of damage 50 times before, except maybe with slightly different cards because I've upgraded the deck a little bit. And so, like, there's not really anything going on. And so I think that all the things that this game has changed in the genre have resulted in the parts of the turn where you're doing stuff feeling more bland because there's no spatial aspect to think about. The teamwork aspect is significantly diminished by the fact that we don't have a collective turn that we can take actions kind of in any order that we want. And we can't sequence our turns how we want. We have to do it in a certain sequence. We have to do it movement first, then attack. And you have to do things in this certain way. And so all these limitations create this feeling of like, it makes it feel way more board gamey and less like an exciting fight against a boss that kind of escapes the confines of a board game, whether that's because of enabling your imagination to run a little more wild or just enabling the table talk to give a little more life to the experience because you have this sort of idea in your mind of you banding together to do some sick teamwork move. That just doesn't happen in this game, really. So like you're just kind of like, I'm going to take my turn and we're going to do what we can to prevent the monster from doing anything. And success is defined as the monster is not allowed to do anything in this game.
yeah.
You know, like that's a good turn. The good turn is that
Yeah.
you hit it
Our
and it did nothing. I mean, that's
our
like,
our best fights were the ones where we could get reaction cards that we just wouldn't trigger basically because we could abuse Ben's taunt mechanic, you
yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And get a few of those sitting out so that the total number of reaction cards that you might trigger, is less. Maybe there's only one or two of them that you have to contend with, less cycling.
Yeah. And I had the taser that would help
Yeah.
tase the monster and get rid of some reactions we didn't want to deal with. And yeah, like mostly, yeah, the a lot of the abilities are like, how do we make it so that this boss doesn't have a fun time and it can't do anything cool?
I mean,
Yeah,
the
which doesn't gonna it's not gonna make me feel like I'm fighting a big cool boss monster. To your
that's the
point,
thing.
Will, it
Yeah.
is very much like, oh yeah, how do I work these damn mechanics? And you might be doing that in other boss battlers. I'm not sure, but yeah, this doesn't lend itself to the storytelling in my book.
Yeah. I mean, you're always trying to game the mechanics in this game, but it's just not thematic in this one, really. And I think that it's not thematic, it's not cinematic, which is, I think, the point of this genre, to be
Mm,
both of those things. And I think that, yeah, I mean, you're just kind of down there doing the math, and you're down in the engine room in this game, just kind of just cranking the gears, and
yeah,
you just do it 50 times until the thing dies. And there's just not really cool moments most of the time. And I feel like I want there I don't want the threat of a boss battle to be like the mechanics of the game. I want the threat to be that the boss is genuinely threatening and that I'm sweating about it, you know? And
Hmm.
again, it's like if the boss has their own turn, then even if you spend your turn sort of trying to mitigate what it's doing, it's still going to have its own turn. It's still going to do something and you have to be ready for it. So it'll still get a pop off and do its cool thing and you'll be like, "Whoa, man, that's crazy." Like that just never happens in this game because I think another thing is that because the reactions are all designed to be like kind of like mini actions, there's no one reaction that is like the equivalent of it taking like its whole turn and doing some big you know how it was Ben like in ATO like in the Cycle 2 boss fight all the crazy shit that guy was throwing out.
Yeah.
It's like there's no reaction card that can do that kind of thing. And so like even when it gets to play the game, it's never doing anything that amazing. It's just doing kind of like a little something here, a little something there, you know.
Yeah, none of the actions, since like there's a potential for a lot of them to be triggered, none of them are really like huge on their own usually. Sometimes they can be pretty powerful, but most of the time it's kind of just like, oh, he's doing damage to people on the sides. How do we, unless you have a green card in your
Unless you
hand.
have a green card. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a good number of them that like kind of have feel bad triggers, right? Like it doesn't, who cares if you have a green card in your hand, right? Like well, that should not have to matter. But you'll have reaction cards that come up and oh you have to have a green card in your hand or oh you need to top deck look at the top two cards of your deck and if one of them is a yellow card then you dodge the damage. It's like why? Just do the damage or don't. I don't know. Like it all seems a little bit silly to me. And one other thing in this game that I really latched onto is kind of a point of, you know, I didn't find it very satisfying was there's so many phases to every turn. And the triggers really matter in these different phases. Especially once you go to like your attrition phase and start having to like redraw and everything. Like I don't know, the system seems a little bit unrefined, a little finicky, a little rough around the edges at parts, even outside of the reactions and all that.
Yeah, it's weird how many it is weird how many different phases there are. It's like you can't just like do a thing on your turn when you want to. It's like, well, you want to use that potion? It's not the
Hmm.
consume phase.
Right,
You want to
right.
you want to use your boots? It's not the start phase. You want to play
Yeah.
that card? You didn't play it as in the opening.
And
You
the
know?
other thing too is that there's so many damn symbols, and a lot of them are only pictured on the reaction cards, so they're like reaction symbols. And they'll just like trigger during certain phases, and you better know what they are.
Yeah, I guess we
Um,
didn't really talk about it that much, but there's also a lot of keywords in this
yes.
game and a lot of like pieces of terrain that do special things that like are only going to be seen in one fight in the entire game or
Yeah.
maybe and
You'll be in
like
the book the whole damn time.
and this is a complaint that could definitely be applied to ATO where ATO has got so many random pieces of terrain and things and obviously the cycle 1 maze bosses in ATO are definitely guilty of this. Those things were a huge pain in the ass, but this game is like it doesn't even really have a board and you have that problem and it's like man like if you were going to simplify the board, why not just get rid of all this stuff? I mean, it's like, why is this complexity still in the game if the purpose was to make it more streamlined? When I played this game, I don't feel like it's streamlined. And I feel like they were trying to make it streamlined, is the weird
Hmm.
thing? I don't think
Yeah.
that the streamlining succeeded.
Yeah, again, the complexity versus depth, like there's a lot, like there's still a lot of complexity that could be removed and you wouldn't remove the depth. Like it doesn't feel like there's like a lot of depth of decision going on. I'm not really thinking like we've talked about, like we're not really thinking a lot on other people's turns. You kind of just like figure out what you've got with your hand, you know? Like and I think that like, I had some stuff that's kind of reactionary and it's either like, okay, well, I'm just going to play this when something bad happens or when everybody else needs a little bit of something. And then Will had like the engine where it was like, well, I'm just going to draw a bunch of cards and I'm just going to enact pretty much the same plan as much as possible. Like,
And it's like that's just what it made sense to do. It wasn't like I was doing that because like I wanted to do it. That's just what my character does, and like that's how we kill the monster. So I didn't even feel like I had a lot of agency there. I'm just doing the thing that I gotta do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and we needed you to do it. It was
You
like
know,
we could like no, neither of us were doing like a ton of damage. I wasn't doing any damage. I did the most damage when I like borrowed your broken build. You know, when I had the one card that was like, "Oh, do their weapon damage twice," and it was like, "Well, Will's got the massive weapon damage, so yeah."
yeah, I
I
don't
don't
know.
know. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
go
felt
ahead.
like I had the most like potential to like have things that I could do, but most of it boiled down to I'm not going to play hardly any cards. And it didn't really even feel like it mattered too much what my cards were. It was just kind of like, oh well, I'm going to save up some stamina tokens and I'm going to give other people some gas. You know, I'm going to taunt the monster and have it face me so that you guys can do damage. Um, I'm like, I don't mind playing support. Like, I'm not even complaining necessarily. I had like a decent enough time doing that. Because I at least felt like engaged in like other parts of the game. But I was like watching Blake have this time where it was like, oh man, like it's my turn. I have all of these cards and I don't even know what to do with them. Like,
Yeah. Well, on that final boss, I had one turn where I started the turn, I think with 12 cards. And then I just had to sit there and like suffer through it. Like I wish that was exciting, you know? And it just wasn't. It was just like, oh God, like how do I trigger the least number of reactions? You know, we're all almost dead. We know we're gonna fucking win, but like I just gotta get through this turn. You know?
But you know,
It
I
was
guess that
miserable.
that's what I was saying with Oswarn, where like I think the deck building being simpler in that game, but limiting your deck to being 7 cards that you just always have, like that's your hand.
Mm,
If the cards aren't on cooldown, is better for this kind of game because it's like you can actually plan.
yeah.
You can plan around your turn when it's not your turn. You can know when you can help people because you know you can keep this card in your hand no matter what and save it for when they trigger the reaction. And it's just like that whole element is just gone from this design. And just the whole, I feel like, I just don't know. It's really weird. Like, I think they like missed the point of
Yeah.
the genre. But, and you know, I am talking about the genre a lot and I am comparing it to these other games a lot. And, you know, maybe it doesn't have to be like a second Oathsworn. Maybe it doesn't have to be like ATO or KDM. And that's fine. It can be its own thing. But even if we're looking at it on its own merits, I still think it would have benefited from some of these elements that are in these other games, or certainly would have benefited from streamlining a little bit. Maybe benefited from a discrete monster turn that's going to bog individual player turns down less. Maybe we would benefit from giving the players more freedom and not only letting players do things like at very certain times, just let them play the game. Give the damn dragon its turn, give players their own turn, you know?
Honestly, the one fix that I would institute immediately is just like, well, we're just going to be level one and we're going to fight level one monsters because I don't want to do more math, you know? Like I don't want to do bigger numbers. Like it didn't. It's just like it's completely unnecessary scaling, in my mind. And like I would love to like I think you could genuinely probably fight like level three monster, have like all of the level three gear or whatever, and but like just have like level one HP. I don't know. There's probably a way to balance it so that you just don't have numbers getting bigger. Because I really think that it just is completely unnecessary. And it's something that's not in ATO from like my experience playing that. And that is the only other boss battler I've played, but it's like you have some of it where it's like, oh, well, I'm gonna get weapons that do more damage, and the boss is gonna have like cards that have a little bit more HP. But then it never breaks into the like hundreds or anything. You know, it's like it's incremental. It's a small amount, you know, and it's usually like those increments are exciting when you get to them. You're like, oh, this weapon does like 2 black dice instead of 2 white. You know, that's going to be like so crazy for trying to hit some of these like higher numbers, that we're running into. But with this, it's just like I'm not even excited to be doing like bigger numbers because it's just like the boss just has more HP. You know, like
Yeah.
like it could be the exact same. You could have the exact same system, have the boss just do more interesting stuff, and have the numbers just be the same. Like the bigger numbers don't do nothing for me.
I'm with you. That I think we had a similar complaint about Eclipse with like how the progression of that game works out. And I do kind of feel similarly about that where I I don't feel like I'm getting more powerful. And that sucks because I want to, you know? There's the same thing with Septima. Um, but yeah, it's a little pitiful. And to your point, Will, yeah, maybe it doesn't need to be compared to just other boss battlers. Well, the level of complexity for the card play in this game, I think, is on a very similar level to Spirit Island, just as a touch point. Spirit Island, you can plan your turn,
Yeah, true,
which makes
true.
it so much better. Like I would rather play Spirit Island than this pretty much any day of the week.
It's funny you bring that up because I was thinking about it, but I decided against saying something. But I was thinking about comparing this game to Uprising, a secret
Yeah,
boss battler.
the secret boss battler uprising. Yeah.
If you think about it,
I would
Yeah.
rather play Uprising than this. I
I
think
was gonna say like
the positive aspects of it for me are similar.
Uprising is secretly a boss battler 4X co-op game.
Yeah. It's got a
Uh,
little bit of everything. It's
yeah, but I was thinking, I was kind of like thinking, I was like, like it's got that element of like you kind of being able to make a cooperative plan. Like, how are we going to deal with this guy? He's going to freaking kill all of us. We got to get rid of him. We got to get him off the board. It's like, okay, I'll go here, take care of him. I'll head him off the pass. We can block him. You have this nice process of like everybody. And the crucial thing is that in in Uprising, there's not really much quarterbacking, and that's like a good co-op game, right? Where like everybody's got enough to do that they can't quarterback, and there's that nice feeling of not like, hey, you do this, and I'll do this, and we'll just do it that way. It's more like, hey, I can come over there. Can you do something? And it's like, yeah, I can do this, and we have this nice back and forth. And again, that's missing from this game, and I think a good co-op game is just going to have that. And where is it?
Yeah, yeah, this one doesn't have the problem of quarterbacking. It's just like we're all individuals that incidentally interact. It's like we're coworkers. I don't know. Like
Yeah,
occasionally we meet
it's
up
like
at the
Euro
water
game. It's
cooler,
like
you
a
know?
Euro game co-op. It's like it's heads down co-op somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's not much. Yeah, there's not much like of oh, we can't because like also, the reactions are hidden. So you can't really even be like, oh, we really can't, do that one. And that's the other thing that like in between all of this tracking, like one of the interesting things might be trying to like remember what the cards do and like what reactions were bad. But I just like was going based on vibes. Like it was just like I think I remember that one card being really bad last time it happened. So we're just like I'm gonna tase it. We're just gonna get rid of it. Like, there's not really like there's nothing there like with maybe I'll like and like it felt like it would be advantageous to me to remember what the
Yeah.
cards did. But like in between all of the other stuff that I have to keep track of, I'm just not going to.
Oh
Like
yeah,
it,
I
it
I felt the
just
same way. I was like, I
yeah.
can't be bothered to think about what that card is. I'm just gonna try not to trigger it. Like that's what I'm
Yeah.
gonna do.
I don't think we fought the last boss. I don't think we ever figured out what the two cards that trigger when you empty your hand do. There might have been one that we triggered once and we were like, that sucked. Let's never do that again. And the
But that
whole
that that
point,
was the end of it. Yeah, we just never
yeah,
triggered one of the main.
and the whole point of that boss was just that like he had by the end of it two extra slots to be able to do it. But both of those slots were clogged up by like we're not emptying our hands because both all of us were just like, well, we'll just hold on to one card. So we're just not going to play out our whole hand and then we just won't have to deal with it.
Well, I don't know if you guys have anything else to say, but I think I've said my piece on this one.
Yeah.
I dislike Primal.
Hey, wait for your turn to score.
Right.
But you can go first if you want.
I'll go first. Um, I I dislike Primal. You know,
Okay.
I this is not the game for me. I suspect that I could be into other boss battlers, but this didn't do it. Um, and I think I'll give it a 4.
Mm,
I can't think of any other games we've rated that I would like want to play less than this one.
right. You'd be
I'm glad that we finished it off,
you'd be more excited to play Eclipse than
Yeah.
this.
Oh, by far. Yeah.
Yeah, I can see it.
I think
Yeah.
I would rather play Eclipse in this as well. Yeah.
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 I think my lowest rated one before this was that
Was it Galactic Renaissance?
yeah, it was Galactic Renaissance. I would definitely rather play Galactic Renaissance
I
than
would
this.
also rather play Galactic Renaissance, I think,
Hmm.
and I would not want to play Galactic Renaissance.
Yeah, me neither.
Just as honestly.
Is it a bit harsh? I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe 4 isn't harsh enough, but I don't like it.
Mm.
Yeah, I guess the answer I had in my brain, the rating I had in my brain locked in, was a 6. And I'm not sure what else. I'm not keeping track. I'm not sure what else I've rated a higher or lower than that, but it feels pretty low for me. Um, I don't know. I I had a decent enough time with this. Again, I was playing a character where I didn't have to think as much. Mostly I was just like offloading all of that mental load to you guys, um, and making you guys do more stuff. So
Hmm.
I don't know. And I guess I rate it more this way because um, I'm not as savvy with like card play in games. So I can't really like make like too much of a comparison of how this rates compared to like other deck builders, you know. I guess it didn't really feel like a deck builder, even though that's kind of one of the like genres that it's going for, because there wasn't really like all that much options in terms of how to build the deck. It didn't really feel like super impactful. I don't know. I guess the I guess I don't know. I'm not as experienced, so
Hmm.
pretty lukewarm though. Yeah.
I think I will give this game a 5. I think it does exactly as many things right as it does wrong. Or
Hence the 5.
maybe more accurately, it has as many good ideas as it does them wrong. So like as I said earlier, the idea to streamline the boss battler board is interesting and creative, but it's not executed well. The idea of having a bigger deck and the card play being what it is interesting, but it's not executed well. The idea of having removing the monster's turn entirely and having it all be reactions in this attrition phase is good, but it's not executed well. So like I have to give this game a certain amount of credit for like going out on a limb and like being like, hey, let's do something like wacky and like interesting. It's just it didn't really land. It's also too much to fix for like a second edition of this game. Like if they say like if they reprint this game and it's like second edition of Primal with like an upgraded rulebook, it's too much. They can't fix it. There's too much to do. I think it's
Although
fundamentally.
it could benefit from a better rule book.
I mean, it could
Hmm.
benefit from a better rulebook. Certainly, the organization of the rulebook is least something to be desired in some places, but I think that these are issues that are kind of core to the game design as it is right now, and it would require like a whole new game to sort of start
Yeah.
from scratch. But I do think that some, if not all of the ideas that they have attempted here could be made into a good game. So it's not irredeemable. I think that I do think that, like I said, some of these ideas are cool, and I have to give them some credit for that. But as a playing the game experience, especially after the first two or three plays, it falls off a cliff. I can't give it higher than a five for that reason.
Hmm.
Um, yep.
Yeah,
And
I forgot to
I'm gonna
yeah.
sell it. Yeah.
I forgot to bring up the grandma scale. You can't teach this to your grandma, I don't think.
Oh yeah, grandma
Um,
No,
would
no.
would
no.
not be long for this world if you busted out Primal on her. I mean, come on.
Also, the other thing I wanted to bring up related to that scale is I think that this is the kind of game that, like, if you brought it to somebody who wasn't much of a gamer, like, your cousin who's got a good head on their shoulders, I think this would, like, put them off of board gaming because I feel like it kind of confirms some of the, like, tropes as somebody who's like outside of the hobby would feel of like, well, why are we doing this thing that's like supposedly exciting, but it's really just a bunch of math? Like,
Yeah, I
you
mean,
know?
yeah, I mean, I
Nerd.
I literally play with my Oathsworn with my cousin who is not a board gamer, and we have fun. And like, if I played Primal with him, it would suck. Like he wouldn't like it, and I'd have to be doing all. I'd have to be the one doing all the bookkeeping and fiddly stuff. And he genuinely likes Oathsworn, and he's like he plays computer games and stuff, but he doesn't really play board games. And that game just onboards you, and it's just interesting enough that it can retain somebody's attention better than this.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I I really do think I rated it too high, and I'm surprised by y'all's ratings. I mean, fair enough points on it. Don't get me wrong. Um, and I agree, Will, that there's a lot of redeemable, things here, a lot of good ideas. And I can understand, Ben, the idea of being a little lukewarm on it and not being so sure about the deck building, but maybe it's okay. I I think I I kind of hate this game, Like like I don't think it's any good. And I four might be like the nice rating. Like this, I don't know. I don't want to get too dramatic, but
Y-
because it doesn't really matter. And it's like, oh, I'll give it a four. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. This is like a fucking 2.5 for me. Like,
But it's okay. I'm
like,
selling it. We don't have to play it again.
Get that out of
yeah,
my sight.
it
I'm
makes me want
selling it.
to hurl.
I feel like I
Yeah.
have to teach Blake ATO at some point so that he can play like a good boss battler. But then again, the act of teaching ATO is like, you must enter under my tutelage and we will venture into the mountains for 50
Right.
hours and
I
then
mean,
you'll come out with a basic understanding of the rules.
I do
Right.
remember we played for a while ATO together, and we had some cooperation, and then I left and came back like halfway through Act Two, and you were like, "Okay, here's this guy, here's what he does." Like, here's this other guy that I've built this way. And it was kind of like, oh man, like you're probably just going to be telling me a lot of what to do. Like,
It changed that much, huh?
I don't th I think you got back into it though. I wasn't quarterbacking for you after like the first battle when you came back, I don't think. Like certainly not in the final battle that I
yeah,
remember. I think especially because ATO is like it's not a deck, it's just here's your tableau. Like here's like the gear that we have lying around that I put on these guys. It's easy to like pull somebody in and like be like, "Hey, here's your Titan. It's the go fast flying around Titan." You know.
yeah.
And I think most of what had happened when you were gone was like story stuff or like everybody from the original Argo crew had like fucking died. Like everyone was
Yeah.
dead. Like your like Otis Zero had retired, your guy had retired, but then like the whole original crew except for one person was just gone. They'd all been killed. And so like I think that's what took a little bit longer was because like they had
Yeah,
new
who are these people?
who are these
Like,
people? Yeah, it was all these newbie cadets that we had to like onboard and God. But yeah,
yeah.
I still this is the thing. This game just lacks this sort of element where like I still think about like moments in ATO like when Otis Zero came through super fucking hard. Like the Hecaton, like pushing him almost off the cliff to like the last possible space before he'd be like sent into the chasm. and then Otis like literally fucking parries the hit and goes Super Saiyan and just kicks the shit out of the Hecaton.
Yeah,
Do you
no,
remember
yeah,
that?
Otis was the comeback king. He was our
It was
he was the clutch king. Like it was always like he was our protagonist. It was like anytime that like the chips were down and we really needed like, stuff to go well, it just happened. You know?
it was like the DBZ situation where like everyone has gotten the shit kicked out of them, but Goku's on the way.
Hmm.
Like Goku's gonna show up, and it's just like Oda Zero is like he's gonna have the moment in the fight where he just like pops the fuck off, and like and it's like normally the Titans can't really 1v1 like a boss because they're just so much more threatening. And Oda Zero would always have these insanely like heroic moments where like he would just go off on the boss. And it was so memorable every time, and Ben and I would just be losing our shit, like, oh my God. and and like those are the moments you're looking for in these kinds of games. Like if the co-op game is not creating those kinds of stories, like what's even the point? You might as well play it like a PvP game and then have the other players be the cause of that story if the boss can't generate that for you in the system, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would agree. And I would love to. I would love to try out something a little different than this for the boss battle category. But yeah,
Anyway, I think that's us for this week.
All right.
Hope you guys enjoyed. Like and subscribe, or don't. Actually, I'd love to just see more people leave comments and liking and subscribing because I don't really care about likes or subscribes, but we always love
Yeah.
to see comments. Thanks, that one
yeah.
loyal
Tell
commenter.
tell us your thoughts on Primal if you've played it.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, see you guys in the next one.
Bye.
Yeah.